Sophie's scream didn't sound like anything I'd heard before. It wasn't her usual cry for milk or her sleepy late-night whimper. No, this was something else. Piercing, desperate, and muffled in a way that triggered something primal inside me. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I dropped the laundry basket and took off across the house, heart pounding, bare feet smacking against the hardwood floor. My throat tightened as I turned the corner toward her room. The nursery door was wide open. My heart dropped. That door was always closed. Always. The soft lavender curtains I had sewn by hand fluttered in the breeze, and I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The window was open, wide open. My eyes darted to the crib, and that's when everything inside me shattered. It was empty. My baby, gone. I froze, unable to breathe, willing this to be some kind of awful mistake, a bad dream. But no. The stuffed elephant Sophie never slept without was lying on the floor, tossed aside like it meant nothing. I forced myself to move, to scan the room. That's when I saw them, muddy footprints, leading from the window to the crib, and back again. A wave of nausea washed over me as the horror clicked into place. Someone had come into my home. Someone had climbed through my baby's window. Someone had taken my daughter. My hands trembled as I grabbed the phone and somehow managed to dial 911. The words came out garbled through tears. My baby's been kidnapped. She's gone, please, someone took her, please help me. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, asked for my address, told me officers were on the way. But I barely heard her. I was already running to the front window, eyes searching for anything that might tell me where she was. And then I saw her. Across the street, standing in her perfectly manicured yard, stood Maureen Wilkins, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association. She was cradling something. No, someone. My Sophie. My baby was in her arms, squirming, wailing, reaching back toward our house. I dropped the phone, still on the call, and bolted out the front door. I didn't care that I was barefoot. I didn't care that I was still in my old stained t-shirt. I didn't care about anything except getting to my child. "Give me my baby!" I screamed, charging across the street, tears blurring my vision. Sophie saw me and cried harder, her little arms stretching out desperately. "What are you doing with her?" I demanded, fury surging through me. Maureen turned to face me, that smug, cold smile fixed on her face like a mask. Her platinum bob was flawless as ever, makeup immaculate, not a hair out of place. And yet, in her arms, my baby was crying like her world was ending. Because it was. "This woman is not the child's mother," Maureen declared flatly, turning slightly to shield Sophie from me. "Just look at them. They look nothing alike." I was so stunned I couldn't speak, couldn't even process what she was saying. That's when I noticed them. 2 police officers standing behind her, arms folded, watching the scene unfold, like they didn't already know exactly what had happened. I felt like the world had tilted off its axis. "What the hell are you talking about?" I shouted. "She's my daughter. She was taken from her crib." Maureen sniffed disdainfully, speaking to the officers like I wasn't even there. "I was gardening when I heard her crying, for nearly an hour. No one came. I had to check. The window was open. I found her all alone, clearly neglected. Something's not right here." She said it so smoothly, like it was rehearsed, like this was her grand performance. One of the officers, a man whose badge read Matthews, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we received a report of suspicious activity. Ms. Wilkins here has concerns about the welfare of the child." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "She broke into my house. She took my daughter from her crib," I yelled, voice cracking with panic and rage. "That's not what happened," Maureen cut in, her tone icy and practiced. "I was simply acting in the child's best interest." "She's my daughter!" I screamed, desperation bubbling up as I tried to take a step closer. Maureen moved again, holding Sophie tighter, keeping her from me like I was the danger. "Then why does she look nothing like you?" Maureen challenged. "And why have I seen different women entering your home at all hours? I believe something very illegal is happening. I've documented everything. I think this child was illegally adopted, or worse." It hit me like a punch to the chest. Sophie had inherited her father Michael's fair skin, blonde hair and blue eyes. I had my mother's Chinese features. We didn't match. But that didn't make me less of her mother. It wasn't the first time someone questioned our relation, but never like this. Never with officers standing by. Never with Sophie screaming in someone else's arms. I could barely breathe. "My husband is white," I managed to say through clenched teeth. "His name is Michael Chin. He's away on business. Call him. Call the hospital. I gave birth to Sophie 11 months ago. I am her mother." Maureen scoffed. "A likely story. Officers, I've filed numerous reports. That house is suspicious. Crying at all hours. Women coming and going. And let's not forget, there are rules in this neighborhood. Rules about home businesses and activities." My stomach twisted as I realized what she meant. The women she saw were my mother and sister, my support system while I worked from home. This woman hadn't seen danger. She had seen difference. And that was all it took for her to try and tear my family apart. Officer Matthews looked conflicted. "Ma'am, do you have identification? Proof of relationship?" "In the house, where I ran out from, because she took my baby." My voice rose to a sharp, desperate pitch. Sophie was getting more and more distressed, her little face red and soaked with tears. "Please just let me hold her. She's terrified." "I don't think that's a good idea," Maureen began, but the second officer, a younger woman with dark eyes and a badge that read Rivera, finally spoke up. "Ms. Wilkins, the child is clearly trying to get to her. Let's all go inside and sort this out calmly, in the mother's home." That moment, those words, felt like a breath of air after drowning. Rivera didn't wait for agreement. She turned and led the way toward my house. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the tiniest sliver of hope. Inside my own home, my legs felt like they might give out beneath me. But I forced myself to stay upright, every nerve in my body alive with urgency and fury. Sophie was still in Maureen's arms, and though Rivera was guiding us calmly through the entryway, I could see how Maureen hesitated at every step, clinging to my daughter like she had some rightful claim to her. Sophie's cries had softened into hiccuping sobs, but her arm still reached for me, trembling with fear and confusion. I wanted to scream, to yank her away, to demand that the officers stop this insanity now, but I knew I needed to prove myself. I needed to show them what should have never been questioned. My fingers fumbled as I tore through the drawer in our hallway table, where I kept all the important documents. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the manila folder I finally found. Birth certificate, medical records, photos, my ID, everything. I dropped the folder on the kitchen table and began laying each piece out like evidence in a trial. "Here," I said, voice hoarse. "Sophie Chin. Born at Memorial Hospital 11 months ago. Mother. May Chin. That's me." I pointed at my name. "Here's my ID. Family photos. Here's one from when she was born. Here's one from her first birthday planning. That's my husband. That's Sophie. That's me. This is my child." The room was silent except for Sophie's whimpering and the quiet rustle of papers. I looked up, meeting Officer Rivera's eyes first. Her expression had shifted. The calm professionalism was still there, but now there was something else. Empathy. She stepped forward slowly, her voice gentle. "Ms. Wilkins," she said firmly but without aggression, "I think you need to give the child back to her mother now." Maureen hesitated, her arms tightening around Sophie, like she was holding on to her final scrap of power. I thought for a moment she might refuse, that she might dig her heels in and cause another scene. But something in Rivera's tone, or maybe the growing weight of her own paranoia unraveling, finally broke through. With obvious reluctance, Moren extended Sophie toward me. The moment my daughter was back in my arms, she melted against my chest with a sob that pierced me deeper than any word ever could. She wrapped her arms tightly around my neck, burying her face in my collarbone. I kissed her head over and over, whispering, "Mama's here. I've got you. You're safe now." Officer Matthews, still standing nearby, finally cleared his throat. "Ms. Wilkins," he said slowly, as though still trying to process everything. "You entered this woman's home without permission. You removed a child from her crib. That constitutes breaking and entering, and kidnapping." His words, though measured, struck like a lightning bolt. Morin's face flushed deep red, but not with shame. No, with disbelief, with outrage. She stepped back, her voice brittle with indignation. "I was protecting a child. I believed she was in danger. I am the head of the HOA. I have a responsibility to maintain the safety and standards of this community." Rivera's voice turned steely. "Being the HOA president doesn't give you the right to break into private homes or remove children. That is not a civic duty. That is a crime." Her eyes shifted to me. "Mrs. Chin, do you want to press charges?" It was a moment I hadn't prepared for. My heart was still racing, my baby still sobbing quietly in my arms. I looked at Moren, this woman who had tormented us for months with petty violations and anonymous complaints. She'd tried to control our existence since the day we moved in, criticizing our mailbox color, reporting the smell of my mother's cooking, sending citations about having a stroller visible on the porch. But this went beyond spite. This was an attack. On my family, on my motherhood, on my identity. "Yes," I said, my voice firm and steady. "I want to press charges." What followed was a blur of official paperwork, restraining orders, interviews and statements. Michael came home immediately, cutting his trip short. When I told him what happened, he was livid, trembling with the kind of rage that only comes when someone you love is threatened. We installed cameras, reinforced the locks, and barely slept for days. Sophie clung to me constantly, waking up crying, not understanding why she felt so afraid, but feeling it all the same. And what stung even deeper than the incident itself were the neighbors who looked away. The ones who whispered at the playground, avoided eye contact at the mailbox, and even had the audacity to suggest that I should have been more understanding of Morin's concerns. But then there were the ones who saw, who understood. The Patels next door brought over steaming pots of dal and homemade chapati, watched Sophie while we met with our lawyer, and never once questioned our belonging. Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street, sweet, fierce, and utterly done with the neighborhood's complacency, organized a community meeting where she stood in front of a crowd and said what no one else dared to. Breaking into someone's home and taking their child is not vigilance. It is criminal, and we will not stand for it. The shift was slow but real. People started showing up, started speaking up. Some even apologized for staying silent. And as the weeks passed and the court date approached, I stopped feeling like a woman under siege. I started feeling like a mother defending her home, her family, and her right to exist exactly as she was. The courtroom buzzed with a low hum of murmurs and shifting feet, the kind of tension that lingers before something irreversible happens. Michael sat beside me, his hand firmly gripping mine, both of us fixed on the door where Moren would appear. I didn't know what to expect, remorse, fear, perhaps even shame. But when she walked in, dressed in a sleek designer suit and wearing her trademark icy composure, head held high as though she were attending a gala and not facing a criminal trial. I felt a different kind of heaviness settle in my chest. There was no guilt in her expression, no sign that she understood the magnitude of what she had done. Her eyes scanned the courtroom briefly, and when they landed on me, there was no softness, no regret. Just the same cold calculation that had fueled her every move since the day we moved in. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and everyone stood as the judge entered. A stern woman with sharp features and steel-grey hair, she carried herself like someone who'd seen it all and had no patience for nonsense. The charges were read aloud: breaking and entering, kidnapping, filing a false report, and unlawful restraint. Each word echoed in the courtroom, a chain of legal truths wrapped around the actions Maureen had so confidently justified. When asked for her plea, she responded, "Not guilty," without a single tremor in her voice. The audacity of it, of standing there after all she'd done and denying every bit of it, tightened something deep in my chest. I thought of Sophie clinging to me that day, terrified and confused, and I knew this wasn't just about proving a point. This was about securing safety. Not just for us, but for every family who didn't look like they belonged in someone else's narrow view of normal. The prosecution came prepared. With every passing hour, they unveiled piece after piece of evidence that left no room for doubt. The security footage we had installed after the incident, though too late to capture the abduction itself, had documented weeks of behavior. Maureen watching our house, pacing her front yard with a clipboard in hand, peeking through bushes as though on patrol. Her handwritten notes were meticulous, detailing the times my mother and sister arrived and left, how long Sophie cried, even what meals we cooked based on smells she didn't like. But the most damning evidence came from her own text messages, casual complaints to friends and fellow HOA members about those people moving into her neighborhood, about how the community was changing too fast, about how she feared for the future of Oak Ridge Estates if standards weren't maintained. The prosecutor didn't have to embellish. He didn't have to spin a story. The facts spoke for themselves. "Ms. Wilkins," he said in a steady voice, "never called Child Protective Services. Never knocked on the door. She didn't ask questions. She didn't gather facts. She made a decision, a dangerous, prejudiced decision, and acted on it without hesitation. She didn't protect a child. She stole one. Because in her eyes, this child didn't belong with this mother. Not because of behavior, not because of danger, but because of appearance. It only took 3 days. When the jury returned, I held Michael's hand so tightly I felt my knuckles pop. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge's eyes never left Maureen as she delivered the sentence. "Ms. Wilkins," she said, her voice firm but measured, "your actions show a disturbing disregard for law, reason, and the sanctity of family. You appointed yourself judge and enforcer, acting not out of concern, but out of personal bias. That is not justice. That is not protection. That is vigilantism fueled by prejudice. In a just society, such behavior cannot go unpunished." She sentenced Maureen to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 3, and ordered her to pay restitution for the security upgrades and trauma therapy. When Maureen was led away, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt tired and relieved. And most of all, I felt that maybe, just maybe, Sophie would never remember the day she was taken from me. That she would never grow up questioning her place in this world based on someone else's warped idea of belonging. That evening, something remarkable happened. The neighborhood hosted its annual summer block party, the first one that actually felt like everyone was invited. Lights were strung across fences, music drifted through the air, and the scent of grilled corn, curry, and roasted meat mingled in a way that felt like home. Sophie toddled confidently across the grass, now steadier on her feet, giggling as Mr. Patel tried to teach her how to throw a frisbee. Mrs. Rodriguez brought over a plate of empanadas and handed it to me with a warm smile. "For the strongest mother I know," she said. And for the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. The burden of constant defense, constant fear, it was lifting, bit by bit. 3 months later, a letter arrived. It was from Moren's attorney. Apparently, as part of her rehabilitation program, she wanted to apologize in person. Michael thought it was a terrible idea, but something inside me said I needed to hear it. Not for her sake, for mine. We arranged to meet at the prison. My mother stayed with Sophie. When I saw Moren again, she looked smaller. Her roots were showing, makeup gone, the stiff armor of her presentation stripped away by the realities of prison life. And yet the first words out of her mouth weren't what I expected. "I still don't understand how she could be yours," she said. I stood ready to walk out. "Wait," she said quickly. "That came out wrong. I mean, I've been doing a lot of thinking in here, a lot of learning. I never questioned my assumptions before. I was afraid of losing something I thought was mine. I never saw what others were gaining. A home, a neighborhood, a life. I was wrong about your family. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. And in that moment, I realized that growth, even when it comes late, matters." I looked her in the eyes. "Sophie's walking now. She talks non-stop. She loves butterflies and hates carrots. She has my laugh and her father's eyes. She is ours in every way that matters, and in every way that doesn't. And she will never, ever question whether she belongs with us." I left the prison without looking back. 1 year after the day everything fell apart, we celebrated Sophie's 2nd birthday in our backyard. Families from across the neighborhood came, bringing dishes from their cultures, sharing stories, laughter, and second chances. As Sophie leaned over to blow out the candles, her cheeks puffed, eyes wide with wonder, I helped her, smiling through the tears I hadn't expected. I looked around at the people gathered around us, at the warmth and color and diversity and strength of the community we had built, and I realized that this was how healing begins. Where Moren had once seen threats, I now saw allies. Where she saw differences to be feared, we found reasons to celebrate. Sophie looked up at me then, blue eyes twinkling, face lit by cake and candlelight, and called out, "Mama!" Just that. So simple, so whole. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that we were exactly where we belonged.